The divorce that started a war. The pen scratched across paper, sealing the end of everything. Marlene watched her husband, the most feared crime boss in the city, sign their divorce decree without even looking at her face. Nico Rinaldi's relief was palpable, a weight lifting from shoulders that carried empires of blood and money. "You'll be safer this way," he muttered, pushing the papers across the desk. Mara nodded, collected her battered bag, and walked toward the door with her spine straight and her secret buried deep. Behind her, his men laughed, placing bets on how long before she came crawling back. If you're ready for a story about secrets, survival, and the kind of love that refuses to die even when it should, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The smoke in Nico Rinaldi's office hung thick enough to taste. Cigar smoke mixed with something darker, the residue of deals made in shadows and promises broken in blood. Marlene sat in the leather chair across from the mahogany desk that had witnessed more confessions than any church, more sentences than any courtroom. The papers between them were crisp and white. So clean they seemed obscene in this place where nothing stayed pure for long. "Sign here," Nico said, his voice flat as winter pavement. He didn't look at her. He hadn't really looked at her in months, not since the warehouse incident, not since she'd seen exactly what kind of man she'd married. His dark hair was immaculate as always, his suit custom-tailored to hide the gun at his ribs and the scars across his back. Handsome in that dangerous way that had pulled her in 3 years ago when she was just a college student working nights at his club to pay tuition. Mara's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the pen. 26 years old and already signing divorce papers from a man most people wouldn't dare to cross on the street. The diamond on her finger, 3 carats, flawless, purchased with money she'd learned not to ask about, caught the dim light and threw tiny rainbows across the document. She wondered if blood money could create something as pure as a rainbow, or if that was just another illusion. "You'll be safer this way," Nico added, and for just a second something flickered behind his storm-gray eyes, something that might have been regret or might have been relief. With Nico, it was always hard to tell. He'd built an empire on being unreadable, on making people guess and getting it wrong until it was too late. "Safer," Mara repeated softly. The word tasted like ash. She'd been safer before she met him. Safer before she fell for the way he'd defended her from a drunk customer with nothing more than a look. Safer before she understood that protection from a man like Nico Rinaldi came with a price that compounded daily. She signed her name in smooth cursive. Mara Lane, taking back the name she'd surrendered when she'd said, "I do," in a courthouse ceremony with only his Lieutenant Gabe as witness. No white dress, no flowers, no family. Her parents had died in a car accident her sophomore year. She'd had no one to warn her away from storm-gray eyes and dangerous smiles. Nico countersigned without hesitation, his signature a bold slash across the page. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the window overlooking the city he controlled through fear and favors. Chicago sprawled below them, Lake Michigan dark as spilled ink in the distance. "Gabe will drive you wherever you want to go," Nico said to the window. "You'll have money in your account by morning, enough to start over." "I don't want your money." "Take it anyway." Now he did turn, and the look he gave her was harder than the concrete that lined the river where bodies sometimes surfaced. "You were my wife. I pay my debts." Was, past tense, already erasing her from his present. Mara stood, smoothing down the simple black dress she'd worn like armor. She'd learned to dress down around Nico's world. Anything too bright, too noticeable, and you became a target. Became leverage. She picked up her leather bag, the only piece of luggage she'd brought. Everything else she was leaving behind. The penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows. The closet full of designer clothes she'd never wanted. the gilded cage that had slowly been suffocating her. Mara. Her name in his mouth stopped her at the door. She didn't turn around. Don't come back. Don't try to contact me. Don't. He paused, and she heard him exhale, a rare crack in his composure. Just disappear. Forget you ever knew me. Already done, she lied, and walked out. The outer office was full of Nico's men, the ones who enforced his will across 6 states and made problems vanish into Lake Michigan. They looked up when she emerged, their faces ranging from smug to pitying. Marco, who'd always leered at her with too much interest, actually laughed. Told you she wouldn't last, he said to Vincent, loud enough for Mara to hear. College girl playing dress-up, 6 months tops, before she's back here begging. I give her 3 weeks, Vincent countered, pulling out his wallet. Soon as her money runs out and she remembers how good she had it. Gentlemen, Gabe's voice cut through their laughter like a blade. He emerged from the hallway, all 6'4" of controlled violence in an expensive suit. Gabe Moretti had been Nico's right hand since they were teenagers running numbers in Little Italy. His loyalty was absolute, his efficiency legendary, his moral code a mystery even after 3 years of Mara watching him operate. Show some respect. For what? Marco sneered. She's nobody now. Just another... Gabe moved faster than a man his size should be able to move. 1 second Marco was talking, the next he was pinned against the wall with Gabe's forearm across his throat. She was the boss's wife, Gabe said quietly, his voice more terrifying for its calm. That means something. Now apologize. Marco's face was turning purple. Sorry, Mrs. Rinaldi. Not Mrs. Rinaldi anymore, Mara said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Just Mara, and I don't need his apology. She looked at Gabe, this complicated man who'd once told her she reminded him of his sister before she died. I can find my own way out. Gabe released Marco and straightened his jacket. Boss said I drive you. Boss's word is law. Even now. Even divorced. Nico's reach extended everywhere. The elevator ride down was silent. Gabe stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of him, eyes forward. Mara watched the numbers descend, 37th floor to 36 to 35, counting down to freedom or falling, she wasn't sure which. He's trying to protect you, Gabe said as they reached the 20th floor. By throwing me away? By cutting you loose before his enemies use you to get to him. Gabe's jaw tightened. There are things in motion, things he can't stop, men who would kill you just to watch him bleed. I know what he is, Gabe. I know what you all are. No. Gabe looked at her then, and something in his dark eyes made her breath catch. You know the surface. You don't know the depths. And if you're smart, you'll take this gift he's giving you and run so far and so fast that those depths never find you. The elevator doors opened onto the garage. Nico's black Mercedes waited, gleaming under fluorescent lights. Gabe opened the back door for her, and Mara slid inside, her bag clutched to her chest like a shield. Where to? Gabe asked, sliding behind the wheel. Mara gave him the address of a motel on the south side, the kind of place that didn't ask questions and didn't keep records. Gabe's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't comment. He simply drove, navigating Chicago's night traffic with the ease of someone who knew every street, every alley, every escape route. They were stopped at a red light when Mara finally spoke. Does he know? Gabe's eyes found hers in the rearview mirror. Know what? She pulled the folded paper from her bag, the ultrasound image she'd gotten that morning, the secret that had turned her world inside out. 8 weeks along. A tiny cluster of cells that would become a person, half her and half the most dangerous man in Chicago. Gabe's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. When did you find out? This morning. I was going to tell him, but then he handed me the divorce papers and... Her voice cracked. He was so relieved, Gabe, so ready to be done with me. That's not... Gabe stopped, his jaw working. It's complicated. Everything with Nico is complicated. Mara carefully folded the ultrasound and tucked it back in her bag. He can't know. Ever. Promise me. Mara, promise me. The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with desperation. You said he's trying to protect me. Fine. Then this stays secret, because if his enemies would kill me to hurt him, what would they do to our child? The light turned green. Gabe didn't move. Behind them, a car honked. Still, he sat frozen, wrestling with something Mara couldn't see. Promise me, she whispered. Please. Finally, Gabe exhaled and pressed the accelerator. I promise. But Mara, if you're keeping this secret, you need to disappear completely. Not just Chicago, not just Illinois. You need to become someone else. I know. I'm serious. New name, new life, no contact with anyone from before. No friends, no social media, no trail. If Nico even suspects you're pregnant with his child, he'll turn the world over to find you, and his enemies will be right behind him. Mara stared out the window at the city she'd called home for 4 years. The city where she'd met Nico, married him, and learned too late that fairy tales about dangerous men saving broken girls always ended in blood. I can do that, she said. I can be no one. Gabe pulled up to the motel, a dingy 2-story building with a flickering vacancy sign and bars on the windows. He killed the engine and turned in his seat to face her fully. I'll help you, he said. Money, documents, whatever you need. But you only get one shot at this. Once you vanish, you stay vanished. You understand? Why would you help me? You're Nico's man. Because you're carrying his child. Gabe's expression softened into something almost painful. Because I had a sister once, and I couldn't save her. Because maybe, just maybe, something good can come from all this darkness. Mara felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. How do I know I can trust you? You don't, Gabe said honestly. But right now, I'm all you've got. He was right. She had no family, no friends she could drag into this nightmare. Her college roommates had drifted away when she married Nico, uncomfortable with his reputation. Her coworkers from the club had known better than to stay close to the boss's wife. She was completely, utterly alone, except for the tiny heartbeat inside her that the ultrasound had shown, flickering like a candle in the dark. Okay, Mara said. Help me disappear. 3 days later, Marlene ceased to exist. Gabe worked with the efficiency of a man who'd made people vanish before, though she tried not to think too hard about whether those people had wanted to disappear or had simply been disappeared. He brought her cash, $20,000 in small bills, nothing traceable. He brought her documents, a driver's license, a social security card, a birth certificate, all in the name of Sadie Mitchell. 28 years old, born in Portland, no criminal record, no ties to Chicago. Memorize the details, Gabe instructed, handing her a folder. Your backstory, where you grew up, where you went to school, why you're starting over. Make it real enough that you believe it yourself. Sadie Mitchell had grown up in foster care after her parents died. She'd bounced around Oregon and Washington, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. She'd worked odd jobs, waitress, retail, cleaning houses, and now she was looking for a fresh start somewhere quiet. Why somewhere quiet? Mara asked. Because quiet places don't look too closely at newcomers, Gabe said. Small towns are desperate for workers, especially in service industries. You can slip in, keep your head down, and no one will question much as long as you do your job. Mara, no, Sadie, studied the documents. The driver's license photo showed her with short blonde hair instead of her natural dark brown waves. Gabe had brought her hair dye and scissors, watched while she transformed herself in the motel bathroom mirror. It had hurt more than she expected, watching her hair fall in chunks to the stained tile floor, watching herself disappear strand by strand. "You'll need a car," Gabe said. "Something old, reliable, forgettable. I've got a 2003 Honda Civic, gray, registered to Sadie Mitchell. It's parked 2 blocks from here." "You've thought of everything." "I've had to." Gabe's voice went distant. "This isn't the first time I've helped someone start over, but it is the first time I've done it behind Nico's back." Mara's hand went instinctively to her still flat stomach. "If he finds out you helped me, he won't. And if he does, I'll handle it." Gabe stood, pacing the cramped motel room. "You need to leave tonight. Every hour you stay in Chicago increases the risk." "Where are you thinking?" Mara had spent the last 3 days researching on a burner phone Gabe had provided. Small towns, far from Chicago, places where strangers might blend in. She'd finally settled on a town she'd never heard of before this week. "Millbrook Springs, Montana," she said. "Population 4,200. They have a veterinary clinic that's hiring an assistant. No experience required, just a willingness to learn." Gabe pulled out his own phone, typing rapidly. "Long way from Chicago. That's good. Remote enough that Nico's network doesn't reach that far. You have any experience with animals?" "I volunteered at a shelter in college, before I met Nico." "That'll work. The clinic won't dig too deep if you're willing to clean cages and handle the grunt work." Gabe pocketed his phone. "I'll set up a P.O. box for you there. If you need anything, you send a postcard signed S to that address. I'll know it's you." "And if you need to reach me?" "I won't. Once you leave, we never had this conversation. You're a ghost, Sadie, and ghosts don't have connections to the living." The words should have terrified her. Instead, they felt like absolution, permission to let go of everything she'd been and become someone new, someone safe, someone who didn't wake up wondering if today would be the day Nico's enemies decided she was worth killing. That night, Mara packed her meager belongings into the trunk of the gray Honda Civic. She'd sold everything that could be traced, her phone, her laptop, even her wedding ring. The money from those sales had brought her cash total to $22,000. Enough to survive for a while if she was careful. She stood in the parking lot, the Montana driver's license feeling like a passport to another world. Gabe had already left, disappearing into the Chicago night after one final piece of advice. Don't look back. Whatever you do, don't look back. But as Mara slid behind the wheel and started the engine, she couldn't help glancing in the rearview mirror at the city lights behind her. Somewhere in that sprawl of glass and steel, Nico was probably working late in his office, making deals that would reshape lives without even knowing it, making decisions that left blood on his hands and ice in his heart. Did he ever think about her? Did he ever regret the divorce? It doesn't matter, she told herself firmly. That life is over. Mara is over. You're Sadie now. She drove through the night, heading west on I-90, putting miles between herself and everything she'd known. The radio played soft country music, songs about heartbreak and highways and starting over. Sadie let the tears come finally, silent and hot down her cheeks, grieving for the girl who'd thought love could save a dangerous man, and for the man who'd chosen his empire over everything else. By dawn, she was in Iowa. By the next afternoon, she crossed into South Dakota. She stopped only for gas and bathroom breaks, sleeping in rest stops with her hand on the knife Gabe had given her, a small, sharp blade that fit perfectly in her palm. You know how to use this? He'd asked when he pressed it into her hand. You stab the soft parts and run, she'd replied. Good. Remember that. Run first. Fight only if cornered. You're protecting 2 lives now. 2 lives. The thought sustained her through the endless miles and lonely nights. She wasn't just running for herself anymore. She was running for the tiny heartbeat that grew stronger every day, for the child who deserved a chance at a normal life, far from Chicago's shadows and her father's sins. Montana appeared on the horizon like a promise, big sky country, all rolling plains and distant mountains. Millbrook Springs sat in a valley surrounded by ranches and farmland, the kind of place where people still waved to strangers and left their doors unlocked. The veterinary clinic was a small building on Main Street, painted cheerful yellow with a hand-carved wooden sign, Millbrook Animal Care, Dr. Sarah Hendricks, DVM. Sadie sat in her car across the street, gathering her courage. This was it. The moment she stopped running and started building something new. Inside, the clinic smelled like antiseptic and dog shampoo. A bell chimed over the door. A woman in her 50s looked up from the reception desk, her smile warm and genuine. "Help you, hun? I'm here about the assistant position," Sadie said, extending her hand. Sadie Mitchell. "Sarah Hendricks, you're the one who called from the road?" Dr. Hendricks shook her hand firmly. "I appreciate someone who follows through. Come on back. Let me show you around." The clinic was small but well equipped. Exam rooms, a surgery suite, kennels in the back for overnight stays. Dr. Hendricks explained that her previous assistant had left to have a baby, and she desperately needed someone who could handle the physical work of managing animals and keeping the place running. "I won't lie to you," Dr. Hendricks said. "It's hard work. Early mornings, late nights sometimes. Animals don't care about holidays. You'll get bit, scratched, peed on, and worse. Pay isn't great, 15 an hour to start. But it's honest work, and I treat my people right." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Sadie said. "And I'm good with animals. They're easier than people." Something in her voice must have resonated because Dr. Hendricks studied her with shrewd eyes. "You running from something, Sadie Mitchell?" Sadie's heart lurched. "What makes you say that?" "Because I've been on this earth 56 years, and I know the look of someone trying to outrun their past. I did the same thing once, about 30 years ago. Came to Millbrook Springs to get away from a bad marriage in Seattle. Never looked back." Dr. Hendricks leaned against the exam table. "I'm not asking you to tell me your story. That's your business. But I need to know, are you in trouble with the law?" "No." "Are dangerous people going to show up at my clinic looking for you?" Sadie thought about Nico's enemies, about the way Gabe had warned her to disappear completely. "Not if I do this right." Dr. Hendricks considered this. Finally, she nodded. "Fair enough. You want the job?" "Yes, please." "Then it's yours. We'll do a trial period, first month. See how we both like it. You need a place to stay?" "I was going to look for an apartment. There's a studio above the clinic. Previous tenant moved out last month. It's small, but it's clean and cheap. $300 a month, utilities included. Interested?" Sadie felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. A job and a home, both in the same afternoon. Maybe this was possible. Maybe she really could build a life as Sadie Mitchell. "Very interested," she said. Dr. Hendricks smiled. "Then welcome to Millbrook Springs, Sadie. I've got a feeling you're going to fit in just fine." Oh, the studio apartment was indeed small, just a main room with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a closet. But it had a window that overlooked Main Street and hardwood floors that creaked in a friendly way. Sadie moved in with her single bag and the cash hidden in the car's spare tire well. She spent her first week learning the clinic's routines. How to properly restrain a nervous dog for vaccinations. How to clean surgical instruments. How to talk to anxious pet owners in the waiting room. Dr. Hendricks was a patient teacher, and Sadie found herself falling into the work with something like relief. The animals didn't care about her past. They only cared if she was gentle with them, if she gave them treats, if she remembered their names. On her second week, a man brought in an ancient dog, some mix of shepherd and retriever, gray-muzzled and limping badly. The man was crying openly. "She's 16, he choked out. "I've had her since she was a puppy, but I can't afford the surgery she needs for her hip. The vet in Bozeman quoted me $3,000. I don't have that kind of money." Dr. Hendricks examined the dog gently while Sadie held her still. The old girl trembled but didn't snap, her brown eyes clouded with pain and trust. Hip dysplasia, advanced arthritis, Dr. Hendricks confirmed. Surgery might give her another year or two of quality life, but there are other options. You mean put her down? The man's voice broke. I know, I thought maybe. Dr. Hendricks looked at Sadie, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then she turned back to the man. Tell you what, I'll do the surgery for cost of materials. You pay what you can, when you can. Dr. Hendricks, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Sadie, get the surgical suite ready. They operated that evening, Sadie assisting as Dr. Hendricks repaired the damaged hip joint with skill born of decades of practice. The old dog survived the surgery and spent the next 3 days recovering in the clinic's kennel, Sadie checking on her between other tasks. When the man came to pick up his dog, he was carrying an envelope with $500 in cash. It's all I have right now, he said, tears in his eyes again. But I'll pay the rest, I swear. Dr. Hendricks took the envelope and handed it directly to Sadie. Your assistant pulled double shifts this week to help with the recovery. This should go to her. Sadie tried to protest, but Dr. Hendricks silenced her with a look. After the man left with his limping but happy dog, Sadie turned to her boss. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Dr. Hendricks was cleaning instruments, not looking at her. You're pregnant, aren't you? Sadie's blood turned to ice. How did you? I'm a veterinarian, not an obstetrician, but I've seen enough pregnant creatures to recognize the signs. You're what, 2 months along? 3? 3, Sadie whispered. Her secret, the one thing she'd guarded so carefully, exposed in a small-town clinic 1,000 miles from Chicago. Does the father know? No. And he can't. Ever. Dr. Hendricks finally looked at her, and in those eyes Sadie saw understanding without judgment. The dangerous people you're running from. Is he one of them? It's complicated. It always is. Dr. Hendricks dried her hands and sat down heavily. Look, Sadie, or whatever your real name is, I'm not going to pry. But if you're going to have a baby, you need to start thinking about prenatal care, doctor visits, what happens when that child is born. You can't do this alone. I don't have a choice. You have me. The words were simple, but they hit Sadie like a physical blow. I meant what I said about running from a bad marriage. My ex-husband was a mean drunk who used his fists more than his words. I had 2 black eyes and a broken rib when I finally left. No money, no job, nowhere to go. A woman in Montana took me in, taught me I deserved better, helped me go back to school and become a vet. Now I'm paying it forward. Sadie felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. You don't know what you're offering. I'm offering you a chance to stop running, to plant roots, to give that baby a stable home. Dr. Hendricks stood and put a hand on Sadie's shoulder. I'm offering you what someone once offered me, a safe place to heal. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Sadie cried for the first time since leaving Chicago, great heaving sobs that emptied her out and left her shaking. Dr. Hendricks just held her, this stranger who'd become the first real friend she'd had in years, and let her grieve for everything she'd lost and everything she could never have. When the storm passed, Sadie wiped her eyes and tried to smile. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't experienced a Montana winter. That winter was brutal. Snow measured in feet, temperatures that cracked water pipes, wind that cut through every layer of clothing. But Sadie survived it. She worked at the clinic, her belly growing round under loose sweaters. She attended prenatal appointments under Sadie Mitchell's name, lying about her medical history because she didn't dare tell the truth. She saved every penny, preparing for the day when she'd have another mouth to feed. And on a March morning, when the snow was finally melting and the first crocuses were pushing through frozen ground, Sadie went into labor. Dr. Hendricks drove her to the hospital in Bozeman. staying with her through 14 hours of pain and fear, and finally, the piercing cry of new life. The nurse placed the baby on Sadie's chest, a girl, perfect and tiny, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same storm gray as her father's. "What's her name?" the nurse asked. Sadie looked down at her daughter, this miracle born from ashes, this proof that something good could survive even in darkness. "Ivy," she whispered. "Her name is Ivy Mitchell." Ivy, the plant that climbed toward light no matter how deep the shadows. Ivy that grew stronger with every obstacle. Ivy who would never know that her father was the most dangerous man in Chicago, or that her mother had once been someone else entirely. In his office overlooking Chicago, Nico Rinaldi signed another contract without reading it, his mind elsewhere. He'd been restless for months, ever since the divorce. His bed felt too big, his penthouse too quiet. He told himself it was better this way. Mara was safe, finally, from the life that would have destroyed her. He didn't know that in Montana his daughter was taking her first breath. He didn't know that his ex-wife had disappeared so completely that even if he searched, he'd find nothing. He didn't know that in trying to protect Mara, he'd lost the only thing that might have saved him from himself. But he would learn. Eventually, every secret came to light. And when Nico Rinaldi finally discovered the truth, the world would burn. 4 years passed like water through fingers, sometimes rushing, sometimes still, but always moving forward. Ivy grew from infant to toddler to a fierce little girl with opinions about everything. She hated peas but loved carrots. She refused to wear anything but purple for 6 months straight. She collected rocks and named them all, building elaborate kingdoms in the dirt behind the clinic where her mother worked. Sadie watched her daughter bloom and felt her heart break 1,000 times over because Ivy had her father's eyes. That particular shade of gray that shifted like storm clouds, intense and penetrating even on a 4-year-old face. When Ivy concentrated on her rock kingdoms or puzzled over a picture book, her brow furrowed the exact same way Nico's had when he was working through a problem. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" Ivy asked one morning while Sadie braided her dark hair before work. Sadie's hands stilled. They'd been over this before, but children asked the same questions in different ways, searching for the truth adults tried to hide. "You have a daddy, sweetheart. He just lives far away." "Why doesn't he visit?" "Because sometimes grown-ups have to live apart to keep each other safe." Ivy turned around, those gray eyes studying Sadie with unsettling intelligence. "Is he a bad man?" "No, baby. He's just a complicated man in a complicated world." "When I'm bigger, can I meet him?" Sadie pulled Ivy into her arms, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and innocence. "Maybe someday, but right now it's just you and me against the world. Is that okay?" Ivy hugged her back fiercely. "That's okay, Mama. We're a good team." They were a good team. Sadie had built a life in Millbrook Springs that felt almost normal. She'd become Dr. Hendrick's full partner, taking on more responsibilities as the older woman began talking about retirement. The townspeople had accepted Sadie Mitchell without question, this quiet young woman with a daughter and no husband who worked hard and kept to herself. Nobody pried. In Montana, people respected privacy. But Sadie never stopped being vigilant. She'd changed her hair color twice more, settling on a dark auburn that looked natural enough. She never posted photos anywhere, never had social media, never used credit cards that could be traced. She paid cash for everything, kept emergency bags packed in 3 locations, and had an escape route planned from every room of their small house. They'd moved out of the studio apartment when Ivy turned 2. At night, after Ivy fell asleep, Sadie sometimes allowed herself to remember. She'd pull out the single photograph she'd kept, not of Nico, that would be too dangerous, but of her younger self, before Chicago, before everything changed. She looked at that girl with her whole life ahead of her and whispered apologies for all the choices that had led here. The nightmares came less frequently now, but they still came. Dreams where Nico found them, where his enemies found them first, where Ivy was torn from her arms while men in dark suits looked on with dead eyes. Sadie would wake gasping, immediately checking Ivy's room to make sure her daughter was still there, still safe, still breathing. "You can't live like this forever," Dr. Hendricks said one afternoon when she'd caught Sadie checking the locks for the third time. "Fear is a heavy thing to carry. It's the only thing keeping us alive. Or it's the only thing keeping you from actually living." Dr. Hendricks was grooming a nervous terrier, her hands steady and sure. "When's the last time you went on a date? Made a friend? Did anything that wasn't work or Ivy?" "I have friends." "You have acquaintances who you keep at arm's length. It's different." The terrier tried to bite, and Dr. Hendricks calmly redirected its attention to a treat. "I'm not saying you should broadcast your past to the world, but you're 29 years old, Sadie. You deserve more than just survival." That conversation stuck with Sadie like a burr. She found herself watching other mothers at Ivy's preschool, the way they laughed together over coffee, shared parenting struggles, made plans for playdates. She always declined their invitations, always had an excuse ready. Too much work. "Ivy's not feeling well. Maybe another time." Except another time never came, because another time meant letting people close enough to ask questions she couldn't answer. Then one Tuesday in October, everything shifted. Sadie was closing up the clinic when a battered pickup truck pulled up outside. A man got out, late 30s, wearing ranch clothes and carrying a cardboard box that whimpered. She recognized him as Cole Stevens, whose family ran one of the larger cattle operations outside town. "Sorry to come so late," Cole said, his weathered face creased with worry. "Found this old boy dumped on our property. He's in bad shape." Sadie looked in the box and her heart clenched. An ancient golden retriever, matted and filthy, so skinny his ribs showed through his fur. His back leg was infected, the wound crawling with maggots. Someone had thrown him away to die. "Bring him inside," she said, already moving toward the exam room. "Dr. Hendricks left early today, but I can stabilize him." Working quickly, Sadie cleaned the wound, administered antibiotics and pain medication, set up an IV for fluids. The dog barely moved, too weak to even whimper, but his eyes, cloudy with age and pain, watched her with desperate hope. Cole stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "Will he make it?" "I don't know. The infection is severe. Even if we save the leg, he's old and malnourished. His body might just give up." "But you'll try?" Sadie looked at the dog, this abandoned creature that someone had decided wasn't worth the trouble. She thought about being thrown away, about running to survive, about the value of lives that others deemed worthless. "I'll try," she said. "But I have to pick up my daughter from daycare. Can you stay with him for 20 minutes? "Of course." Sadie drove to the daycare faster than she should have, her mind already calculating medication schedules and recovery protocols. She found Ivy building block towers with 2 other children, completely absorbed in her architecture. "Mama!" Ivy jumped up, scattering blocks everywhere. "Look, I made a castle." "It's beautiful, baby, but we need to go back to the clinic. There's a sick dog that needs our help." Ivy's eyes went wide. "Can I help too?" "You can keep me company while I work." They drove back together, Ivy chattering about her day, how Tommy pushed her but she didn't push back, how they had applesauce with lunch and she traded her crackers for Emma's cheese stick. Normal things, safe things, the kind of childhood Sadie had dreamed of giving her. At the clinic, Cole was sitting beside the exam table, his rough hand gently stroking the dog's head. He looked up when they entered, and something in his expression softened when he saw Ivy. "You must be Ivy. I'm Cole." Ivy, usually shy around strangers, walked right up to the exam table and peered at the dog. "What's his name?" Don't think he has one, sweetheart. He was dumped. Nobody wanted him. Ivy's face crumpled with indignation. That's mean. Everybody deserves a name. She looked at the dog seriously. I'm going to call you Bear because you're big and golden like a bear. Bear it is, Cole said, smiling slightly. Sadie spent the next 2 hours monitoring Bear while Ivy did homework at the reception desk, and Cole waited with the patience of a man used to dealing with sick animals. Finally, Bear's vitals stabilized enough that Sadie felt comfortable setting up a recovery kennel for the night. I'll sleep here, she said. Someone needs to monitor him. I can do it, Cole offered. You've got a little one to take care of. I've slept in the clinic before. We'll be fine. Sadie began gathering blankets and pillows from the supply closet. But thank you for bringing him in. A lot of people would have just left him to die. That's not how we do things on the ranch. Cole settled his hat back on his head. We take care of our own, even the broken ones. Especially the broken ones. He paused at the door. I'll come by tomorrow to check on him. Maybe bring some of my daughter's old stuffed animals for Ivy. You have a daughter? Emma. She's in Ivy's preschool class. The one who traded cheese sticks today. Cole's smile was genuine and warm. Single dad trying to figure out parenting. It's harder than managing 2,000 head of cattle. Single mom trying to do the same. I understand. Something passed between them then, an acknowledgement of shared struggle. Cole tipped his hat and left, his truck rattling away into the October darkness. Ivy fell asleep on the waiting room couch while Sadie checked Bear's vitals every hour. The old dog held on, stubborn and determined, his breathing steadying as the antibiotics fought the infection. Around midnight, Sadie allowed herself to doze in the chair beside his kennel, one hand resting near the wire door. She woke to Ivy's scream. Sadie was on her feet instantly, her heart hammering, reaching for the knife she kept hidden under the desk. But Ivy wasn't in danger. She was standing at the clinic's front window, pointing at something outside with shaking hands. Mama, there's a man watching us. Sadie looked through the window and felt her blood turn to ice. Across the street, partially hidden in shadow, stood a figure. Too dark to see details, but definitely watching. Definitely wrong. 5 years of careful hiding threatened to unravel in that moment. Had they found her? Had Nico's enemies finally tracked her down? Or worse, had Nico himself discovered the truth? Go to the back room, Sadie whispered, pulling Ivy away from the window. Lock yourself in the supply closet. Don't come out until I say. Mama, I'm scared. I know, baby. Be brave for me. Can you do that? Ivy nodded, tears streaming down her face, and ran for the back. Sadie heard the lock click and forced herself to breathe. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her eyes never leaving the figure across the street. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone watching my business. I'm alone with my daughter, and I don't know who they are. What's your location? Sadie gave the address, her voice steadier than she felt. The dispatcher said a deputy was 5 minutes away. 5 minutes felt like 5 years. The figure moved, stepping into the streetlight, and Sadie's breath caught. Not one of Nico's men. Not anyone she recognized. Just a teenager, maybe 17, wearing a hoodie and looking lost. But her relief was short-lived because as the teenager walked away, she saw something that made her stomach drop. A car parked further down the street, dark and expensive and completely out of place in Millbrook Springs. And inside that car, the brief flare of a cigarette. Someone was watching. Someone with resources. Someone who'd found her despite every precaution. The deputy arrived, young, earnest, taking her statement seriously. He checked the area, found nothing, promised to patrol more frequently. Sadie thanked him and locked the clinic doors with trembling hands. In the supply closet, she found Ivy curled in a ball, hiccuping with residual sobs. Sadie gathered her daughter close and whispered lies about everything being fine, about it just being a confused kid. about them being safe. But that night, after Ivy finally fell back asleep, Sadie made a decision. They couldn't stay in Millbrook Springs. Whoever was watching might come back, might start asking questions, might piece together who Sadie Mitchell really was. She started planning their next disappearance. New town, new name, new life. It was exhausting and heartbreaking, but it was survival. Always survival. Except when she went to tell Dr. Hendricks the next morning, she found the older woman in her office with tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Dr. Hendricks looked up, and Sadie saw something she'd never seen before. Defeat. "Cancer," she said simply. "Stage 4 pancreatic. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months." The world tilted. Sadie sank into a chair, her own problems suddenly small and selfish. "Sarah, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be practical." Dr. Hendricks wiped her eyes impatiently. "I need someone to take over the clinic, someone who knows how to run it, who cares about these animals and this town. Someone I trust. I can help you find—" "I want you to take it, Sadie. I'm leaving the clinic to you in my will. The building, the equipment, the client list, everything. It's yours if you want it." "I can't accept that." "Why not? You've earned it. 4 years of hard work, of caring when you didn't have to, of being the daughter I never had." Dr. Hendricks' voice broke. "Please, let me do this one good thing before I go. Let me give you and Ivy a future." Sadie thought about running again, about packing up in the night and vanishing like smoke, about the endless cycle of fear that had defined her life since leaving Chicago. Then she thought about Ivy naming a dying dog Bear, with absolute confidence that names mattered, that all creatures deserved dignity. She thought about Cole Stevens saying they took care of the broken ones. She thought about Dr. Hendricks offering her the same second chance someone had offered her 30 years ago. "What if someone from my past finds me?" Sadie whispered. "Then we deal with it together. You're not alone anymore, Sadie. You have a whole town that would stand with you, even if they don't know your real story." Dr. Hendricks reached across the desk and took her hand. "Stop running. Plant roots. Fight if you have to, but stop running." That afternoon, Sadie called Gabe for the first time in 5 years. She drove to the next town over, used a payphone like some kind of spy movie cliché, and dialed the number he'd made her memorize. He answered on the second ring. "Yes?" "It's me." Silence. Then, "You're not supposed to call. Ever." "I know, but someone's watching me. A car. Expensive. Out of place. I need to know if Nico's looking for me." More silence. Sadie could hear her own heartbeat in the quiet. "He's not looking," Gabe finally said. "Nico doesn't know you exist anymore. As far as he's concerned, Marlene disappeared after the divorce and he's moved on." "Then who's watching?" "Could be anyone. You were married to one of the most powerful men in the Midwest. His enemies have long memories." Gabe's voice dropped. "Or it could be nothing. Paranoia plays tricks. How's the kid?" "She's perfect. Smart, fierce, stubborn as hell." "Like her mother." Sadie could hear the smile in his voice. "And like her father, though he'll never know it." "Gabe, if something happens to me, if they find me and it goes bad, there's a woman here, Dr. Sarah Hendricks. She'll take care of Ivy, make sure Ivy knows she was loved, even if she never knows the whole truth. Nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that." "I do know this. You're stronger than you think. You survived Nico Rinaldi. You survived leaving everything behind. You're raising a kid on your own in the middle of nowhere. You're a goddamn warrior, Sadie, even if you don't feel like one." The words settled into Sadie's chest like warmth. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just stay smart, stay hidden, and call if you need anything. I mean it. Anything." Gabe paused. "And Sadie, stop looking over your shoulder long enough to see what's right in front of you. You deserve some happiness." The line went dead. Sadie drove back to Millbrook Springs slowly, thinking about happiness and roots, and whether she could have both. The expensive car never appeared again. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe it had been everything. She'd never know. But she made a choice that day. She chose to stay. Chose to accept Dr. Hendrick's gift. Chose to let Ivy put down roots in good soil. Over the next months as doctor, Hendricks's health declined. Sadie learned to run the clinic business side. How to manage accounts, order supplies, handle the paperwork that kept a small practice afloat. Cole Stevens became a regular presence, bringing his daughter Emma for play dates with Ivy, staying for coffee, helping with repairs around the clinic. "You don't have to do this," Sadie said one Saturday while he fixed a broken kennel door. "I know, but I want to." Cole looked at her with honest brown eyes. "You're a good person, Sadie. You deserve people who show up for you. You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you work yourself to exhaustion taking care of animals and people. I know you're raising an amazing kid on your own. I know you're scared of something, but you don't let it break you." He set down his tools. "I know I'd like to get to know you better if you're interested." Sadie's first instinct was to run, to shut down, to protect herself with walls built from fear. But she thought about Gabe's words, about Dr. Hendrick's advice, about Ivy asking why she didn't have a daddy. "I'm interested," she said quietly, "but I need to go slow. I have complications." We all have complications. Mine include a 6-year-old who thinks she's a horse and a ranch that's always one bad season from bankruptcy. Cole smiled. "Slow works for me." They started slow. Coffee dates while the girls played. Dinners at the local diner. Conversations that gradually peeled back layers. Though Sadie always held back the deepest truths. Cole never pushed. Seemed content to let her share what she could when she could. Dr. Hendricks passed away on a Tuesday in April, surrounded by friends and holding Sadie's hand. She'd lasted 8 months instead of 6, stubborn to the end. The whole town turned out for her funeral. Sadie stood with Ivy and Cole and Emma, watching them lower into the ground the woman who'd saved her life, and felt grief mixed with gratitude. The clinic officially became Sadie's. She hired an assistant, expanded their services, built on Dr. Hendricks's legacy. Ivy started first grade and made friends easily, her father's charisma showing through in her ability to lead other children in elaborate games. Bear, the old golden retriever who'd survived against all odds, became the clinic mascot, gentle with nervous animals and adored by every child who walked through the door. Life felt almost normal, almost safe. Sadie let herself believe it might last. Then one morning in June, everything changed. Cole came to the clinic, his face ashen, carrying his phone like it was a live grenade. "Sadie, you need to see this." He showed her a news article from Chicago. A war was erupting between crime families. Bodies were dropping. The FBI was investigating. And at the center of it all was a name that made Sadie's blood run cold. Nico Rinaldi. But it wasn't just about Nico. It was about his enemies consolidating power, forming alliances, going after anyone connected to him. The article mentioned violence spreading beyond Chicago, reaching into other states as rival factions hunted for leverage. "Why are you showing me this?" Sadie asked, though she already knew. "Because I'm not stupid," Cole said gently. "You're running from something. Someone. And I'm guessing it has to do with this." He pointed to Ivy's school photo on Sadie's desk. "She has unusual eyes, storm gray, distinctive. The kind of eyes that might make someone look twice if they were searching for them." Sadie's hands were shaking. "Cole, I don't need to know the details, but I need to know if you and Ivy are in danger." The truth fought its way up Sadie's throat. She'd kept it buried for 5 years, but watching this man who'd shown her nothing but kindness and patience, she couldn't lie anymore. "Her father is Nico Rinaldi," she whispered. He doesn't know she exists, but if his enemies find out, they'll use her to destroy him. They'll kill her just to watch him burn. Cole absorbed this without flinching. Then we make sure they never find out. We keep her safe, whatever it takes. We? You're not alone anymore, Sadie. You have me. You have this town. We protect our own. He pulled her into his arms, and Sadie let herself lean into his strength. But we need a plan. If this war is spreading, we can't just hope they miss Montana. That night, after Ivy was asleep, Sadie and Cole sat at her kitchen table making contingency plans. Escape routes, safe houses, people they could trust. It felt like 5 years of peace unraveling, but Sadie refused to run again, refused to let fear win. If they come, she said, I fight. No more running. If they come, Cole corrected, we fight. Together. Across the country in Chicago, Nico Rinaldi stood in his office staring at casualty reports and felt nothing. His empire was fracturing. His enemies were circling, and somewhere in the back of his mind a ghost whispered, Mara. He'd divorced her to keep her safe, cut her loose before the coming storm could drown her. He wondered if she'd survived, if she'd thought about him, if she'd found the peace he'd wanted for her. He didn't know that his daughter was learning to ride horses on a Montana ranch, or that his ex-wife had built a life worth fighting for, or that the storm he'd tried to protect her from was finally coming, carried on winds that reached across state lines and through time itself. The wheel was turning. The past was catching up. And soon, very soon, every secret would come to light, wrapped in violence and blood and a love that had never really died, only gone dormant, waiting for the spark that would set everything ablaze. The war reached Montana on a Tuesday afternoon when Ivy was 7 years old. Sadie had just finished vaccinating a litter of puppies when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words, but they turned her world to ice. They know. Run. Gabe. It had to be Gabe. He'd kept his promise for 7 years, watching from the shadows, keeping her secrets. If he was breaking silence now, it meant the threat was real and immediate. Sadie's hands moved on autopilot, finishing with the puppies, while her mind raced through scenarios. Her assistant Jenny was handling the front desk. Ivy was at school for another 2 hours. Cole was at the ranch. She had time, maybe, to grab what mattered and disappear before... The bell over the front door chimed. Sadie looked up through the exam room window and felt her heart stop. 2 men in dark suits, completely wrong for Montana in June, scanning the waiting room with the predatory awareness of hunters. One of them locked eyes with Jenny and smiled, all teeth and no warmth. We're looking for Sadie Mitchell, he said, his voice carrying through the thin walls. We heard she's excellent with animals. Jenny, bless her, didn't miss a beat. She's with a client right now. Can I schedule you for later this week? We'll wait. Sadie moved silently to the back door, her breath coming in short gasps. The emergency bag she'd kept packed for 7 years was in the storage closet. Cash, documents, everything she'd need to vanish. She grabbed it, fingers fumbling with the zipper to make sure Ivy's papers were inside. Her phone buzzed again. Cole this time. 2 men asking about you at the school. Grabbed Ivy and Emma. We're safe. Where are you? Relief and terror flooded through her in equal measure. Cole had their daughter. Cole would protect her. But men were at the school, men were at the clinic, and that meant they'd found her despite every precaution. She texted back, clinic compromised, meet at checkpoint 3. Checkpoint 3 was a hunting cabin Cole's family owned in the mountains, accessible only by a rough logging road that most people didn't know existed. They'd planned for this scenario, rehearsed it like a fire drill, hoping they'd never need to use it. Sadie slipped out the back door and ran for her truck, parked in the alley behind the clinic. She'd made it halfway there when a voice stopped her cold. Mara Rinaldi, or should I say Sadie Mitchell. She turned slowly. A third man, older than the others, leaning against her truck like he had all the time in the world. He He was smoking a cigarette, the ember bright in the afternoon shadow. Something about his face was familiar, but Sadie couldn't place it. "You have me confused with someone else," she said, calculating distances. 20 feet to the truck. He was blocking the driver's door, but she could probably make it to the passenger side if she ran. "Do I?" The man took a long drag and exhaled smoke toward the sky. "Because I've been looking for Mara Rinaldi for 7 years, Nico's ex-wife, the one who vanished like smoke after their divorce. And imagine my surprise when I finally found her in the middle of nowhere, Montana, playing veterinarian and raising a daughter." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" He flicked the cigarette away and pushed off from the truck. "Let me introduce myself, Silas Marconi. I'm what you might call a business competitor of your ex-husband's. We have some unresolved issues, Nico and I. Unfortunately, he's been very difficult to reach lately. Lots of security, lots of paranoia, but then I learned something interesting." Sadie's hand moved to the knife in her pocket, the one Gabe had given her 7 years ago. "I'm not interested in your business disputes." "Oh, but you should be, because you see, I didn't just find you, Mara. I found your daughter, little Ivy Mitchell, 7 years old, birthday in March. Which means you were pregnant when you divorced Nico. Which means he has a child he doesn't know about. Which means I have the leverage I've been searching for all this time." The world narrowed to this moment, this man, this threat. Sadie pulled the knife and held it steady despite her shaking hands. "Stay away from my daughter." Silas smiled, genuinely amused. "There's the fire. I was wondering if Nico's taste in women had gotten soft. But no, you've got spine. Good. You're going to need it." He pulled a gun from inside his jacket, casual as anything. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me quietly. We're going to collect your daughter from wherever your cowboy boyfriend stashed her. And then we're going to take a little trip to Chicago, where Nico is going to have a choice to make. I'll die before I let you touch her." "Probably. But the question is, will you let her die to protect Nico?" Silas's smile faded into something colder. "Because that's the choice, Mara. You cooperate. Maybe I let the girl live. You fight, and I make sure her death is slow enough that Nico hears every scream before I kill him too." Behind Sadie, the clinic's back door opened. Jenny stepped out, took in the scene, and immediately retreated back inside. Smart girl. Sadie heard her on the phone, calling 911, but she knew the deputy was at least 10 minutes away. 10 minutes was an eternity. "The police are coming," Sadie said. "Good. I'll kill them too if they get in my way." Silas gestured with the gun. "Drop the knife. Now." Sadie's mind raced through options. Fight and probably die, leaving Ivy vulnerable. Run and lead them to Cole and the children. Surrender and hope for a chance to escape later. Every choice was impossible. Every path led to blood. She dropped the knife. "Smart girl. Now walk toward me, slowly." Sadie took one step, then another. She was calculating the distance for a desperate lunge when a truck engine roared to life nearby. Cole's pickup came screaming around the corner, heading straight for Silas. The man dove out of the way, firing wildly. Bullets punched through the truck's windshield, but Cole kept coming, slamming on the brakes right next to Sadie. "Get in!" he shouted. Sadie didn't hesitate. She yanked open the passenger door and threw herself inside. Cole hit the gas before her door was even closed, tires smoking as they fishtailed out of the alley. More gunshots followed them, one bullet taking out the back window, but then they were on Main Street, weaving through light traffic, putting distance between themselves and Silas Marconi. "The girls?" Sadie gasped. "My foreman has them. He's taking them to the cabin the long way, making sure they're not followed." Cole's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw set. "I came back when I got a bad feeling. Good thing I did." "Cole, I'm sorry. I should have told you everything." "Save it. We need to get to the cabin, make sure the girls are safe, then figure out our next move." He glanced at her, his eyes fierce. But Sadie, we can't run forever. These people found you once. They'll find you again. I know. So what do we do? Sadie looked at her hands, still shaking from adrenaline. She thought about 7 years of hiding, 7 years of fear, 7 years of looking over her shoulder. She thought about Ivy asking about her father, about the life they'd built in Millbrook Springs, about everything they stood to lose. We call Gabe, she said, and then we end this. The cabin was exactly as they'd left it during their last supply run, isolated, defensible, stocked with enough food and water for a week. Cole's foreman had arrived 15 minutes before them with both girls, who were treating the whole thing like an adventure. Emma was explaining to Ivy how pioneers used to live in cabins just like this, while Ivy examined the dusty furniture with solemn interest. Mama! Ivy ran to Sadie the moment she walked in. We're pioneers. Emma says pioneers were brave and tough, and they didn't need electricity. Sadie hugged her daughter so tight it probably hurt, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and playground dirt and innocence. That's right, baby. We're going to be pioneers for a little while. Is it because of the bad men? Sadie pulled back, studying Ivy's face. Those storm gray eyes, so much like Nico's, watching her with understanding beyond her years. Yes, but you're safe here. I promise. You always keep your promises, Mama. Ivy kissed her cheek and ran back to Emma, the crisis already forgotten in the way of children who trust their parents to handle the monsters. Cole pulled Sadie aside while his foreman kept watch outside. Call your contact. We need to know what we're dealing with. Sadie used the burner phone from her emergency bag and dialed Gabe's number. He answered immediately. Where are you? Safe for now. What happened? Silas Marconi happened. He's been consolidating power for months, taking out Nico's allies one by one. Now he's making his final play. He needs leverage to draw Nico out of his fortress, and somehow he found out about you. Gabe's voice was tight with controlled fury. I did everything I could to keep you hidden. I don't know how he broke through. Does Nico know? Silence. Then, not yet, but he will soon. Silas is going to make sure of it. Gabe, he has a daughter, Ivy. She's 7 years old and she's brilliant and fierce, and she doesn't deserve any of this. I know, I've known since you called me that day 5 years ago. I've been watching from a distance, making sure you were okay. Gabe exhaled slowly. Nico has a right to know he has a child. Nico gave up that right when he divorced me to keep me safe, to keep me. Telling him now just puts Ivy in more danger. She's already in danger. Silas knows about her. That ship has sailed, Mara. The name hit her like a slap. She hadn't been Mara in 7 years. Hadn't let herself be that girl who'd fallen for a dangerous man and paid the price. Don't call me that. It's who you are. Running doesn't change the truth. Gabe's voice softened. Listen to me. Nico is going to war with Silas whether you're involved or not. This has been building for years. But if he knows about Ivy, if he knows what's at stake, he'll fight harder, smarter. He'll burn the world down to protect his daughter. That's what I'm afraid of. Sometimes the world needs to burn so something better can grow. Papers rustled on Gabe's end. Where are you exactly? I'm sending help. Sadie gave him the coordinates of the cabin. Gabe promised to have a security team there within 12 hours. People he trusted, absolutely. People who could keep Ivy safe while they figured out the next move. And Mara? When this is over, you need to tell Nico the truth. He deserves to know his daughter. She deserves to know her father. The call ended before Sadie could argue. Night fell over the Montana mountains, the darkness absolute in a way that city people never experienced. Sadie sat on the cabin's porch with Cole, watching the tree line for movement while the girls slept inside. Tell me about him, Cole said quietly. About Nico. Sadie wrapped her arms around herself, fighting off the chill. What do you want to know? Why you loved him? It was a fair question, and Cole deserved honesty after everything he'd done for her and Ivy. Sadie thought back to the girl she'd been at 22, working nights at a club to pay for college, exhausted and alone, and drowning in grief from losing her parents. He saw me, she said finally. Not the grieving orphan or the struggling student, just me. One night, a customer got aggressive, grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. Before security could even move, Nico was there. He didn't hit the guy or threaten him. He just looked at him, and the man let go and left. Then Nico asked if I was okay. That's it? That was the beginning. He started coming to the club regularly, always sitting in my section, tipping well, talking to me like I mattered. He asked about my classes, my dreams, what I wanted to do after graduation. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't since my parents died. Sadie smiled sadly at the memory. I knew he was dangerous. Everyone knew. But he was gentle with me, protective. And I was so lonely that I let myself believe the protection was worth the price. When did you realize it wasn't? About 6 months into the marriage, I saw him beat a man nearly to death for stealing from him. The violence was so casual, so efficient. Afterward, he came home and kissed me hello like nothing had happened. That's when I understood that the gentleness he showed me was compartmentalized. It didn't mean he wasn't capable of terrible things. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Do you still love him? I love who I thought he was. But that man might not have ever existed. He might have just been a story I told myself to justify the choice I'd made. Sadie looked at Cole, this good man who'd shown her what steady, uncomplicated care looked like. I'm not that girl anymore. I'm Sadie now. Mara died when she signed those divorce papers. Except she didn't. She's still inside you, and she's about to come face to face with the man she ran from. Cole took her hand. When that happens, I need you to remember something. Whatever you felt for him, whatever you still feel, Ivy comes first. Always. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to walk into a war zone with a man who has every reason to be furious that you kept his daughter from him. That's a dangerous combination of emotions and weapons. Sadie squeezed his hand. If anything happens to me, you take Ivy and you run. You change her name, you move somewhere even more remote, and you raise her to be strong. Promise me. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me anyway. Cole pulled her close, and Sadie let herself lean into his warmth. I promise. But you're going to survive this, and when you do, we're having a serious conversation about the future, about whether there's room in your life for someone who isn't running from the past. Before Sadie could answer, headlights cut through the darkness. She was on her feet instantly, hand on the gun Cole had given her. But the vehicle that pulled up wasn't Silas's sedan. It was a black SUV with tinted windows, and the man who stepped out moved with military precision. Sadie Mitchell, he called. I'm Marcus Webb. Gabe Moretti sent me. Gabe's security team had arrived early, which meant the situation was even worse than Sadie had thought. Marcus brought 3 other men, all former special forces, all handpicked by Gabe for their discretion and loyalty. They set up a perimeter around the cabin and assured Sadie that nothing would get through them. How bad is it? She asked Marcus. Silas has a dozen men in Montana that we know of. He shut down the roads leading out of the area, set up checkpoints disguised as construction. He's not trying to hide anymore. He wants Nico to know exactly what's happening. Marcus pulled out a tablet showing surveillance footage. This is from 2 hours ago. The footage showed Silas standing in front of a camera holding up a photograph of Ivy from her school pictures, the one where she was smiling, her gray eyes bright with joy. Nico, Silas said to the camera, I know you're watching. I know your people will make sure you see this, so let me be very clear. This is your daughter, 7 years old, raised in Montana by the wife you threw away. She has your eyes, Nico, your features. She's yours, and I have her location. You have 48 hours to meet me in Prague, alone. If you don't show, or if you bring your army, I start sending you pieces of her, starting with those beautiful gray eyes." The footage ended. Sadie felt bile rising in her throat. Prague? Why Prague? Neutral ground, European soil where neither of your organizations has total control. It's where Silas wants to make his final stand. Marcus put away the tablet. Gabe is already working on getting you and the girl out of the country before Silas can make good on his threats. But we need to move fast. What about Nico? Is he going to Prague? Marcus met her eyes. What do you think? Silas just told him he has a daughter and threatened to torture her to death. Of course he's going to Prague. He's probably already wheels up. Sadie's world tilted. After 7 years of silence, after building an entire life around keeping Ivy secret, Nico knew. He knew he had a daughter, knew she was in danger and he was coming. Everything she'd run from was about to catch up, wrapped in violence and blood and a father's fury. "We need to get to Prague first," she said. "What? No, the plan is to get you to safety." The plan just changed. If Nico walks into Silas's trap alone, he's dead. And if he's dead, Silas has no reason to keep me or Ivy alive. We become loose ends. Sadie's mind was racing, pieces clicking together. But if we're there, if Silas sees us, he has to keep us alive for leverage. It buys time for Gabe and Nico's people to mount a rescue. That's insane, Mucky. You want to walk into the trap? I want to control the narrative. Right now, Silas thinks he has all the power because he has information. But he doesn't actually have Ivy. We do. And as long as we stay ahead of him, we have options. Marcus looked at Cole, who shrugged. She's right. We can't run from this. We can only run toward it and hope we're fast enough to change the ending. Gabe's gonna kill me for this, Marcus muttered. But he was already pulling out his phone, making calls, arranging transportation. Fine. We leave in 2 hours. Private airfield outside Bozeman. From there we fly to Montreal, then Prague. Total travel time about 18 hours. That gives us maybe 12 hours before Nico's deadline with Silas. Sadie went inside to where Ivy and Emma slept curled together on the couch. She knelt beside her daughter, smoothing back her dark hair, memorizing her face. In a few hours, she was going to take this child into the most dangerous situation imaginable. She was going to introduce Ivy to her father in the middle of a war zone. It was insane and reckless and possibly suicidal. It was also the only way to keep her alive. Mama? Ivy's eyes fluttered open. Are we still pioneers? The bravest pioneers ever, Sadie whispered. We're about to go on an adventure across the ocean. Would you like that? Will there be planes? Yes, baby. Will I meet my daddy? The question froze Sadie's breath in her lungs. What made you ask that? I heard the men talking. They said my daddy is looking for me. They said he's dangerous, but he loves me, even though he doesn't know me yet. Ivy sat up, suddenly very awake and serious. Is that true? Sadie pulled her daughter close. Yes. Your daddy is very dangerous, but not to you, never to you. He's going to want to protect you, and we're going to let him. But Ivy, I need you to be very brave. Can you do that? I'm always brave, Mama. You taught me. I know you did, baby. I know. They flew out at 3 a.m, Ivy sleeping against Sadie's shoulder while the mountains fell away below them. Cole stayed behind with Emma, promising to keep her safe and to be there when Sadie came back, if she came back. He'd kiss Sadie goodbye like it might be the last time, and maybe it was. The flight to Montreal was smooth. The connection to Prague was longer, giving Sadie too much time to think. Marcus and his team maintained constant contact with Gabe, who was coordinating from Chicago. Nico had indeed left for Prague, but he hadn't gone alone despite Silas's demands. He'd brought a small team of his best people, ready to burn Prague to the ground if necessary. He's going to be angry, Gabe warned over the phone. When he sees you, when he learns the truth about what you did, He's going to lose his mind. I can handle Nico's anger. Can you? Because the last time I saw him this furious, 3 people died and a building burned down, and that was over a stolen shipment. This is his daughter Mara, his child that he didn't know existed. You took 7 years from him. He's not going to forgive that easily. I didn't do it to hurt him. I did it to protect her. Tell him that. Make him understand. Because if Nico goes into that meeting with Silas while he's still angry at you, he's going to make mistakes, and mistakes get people killed. Prague greeted them with rain and gray skies, the city beautiful and ancient and completely indifferent to the violence about to unfold in its streets. Marcus had arranged a safe house in the Old Town district, an apartment with reinforced doors and multiple exits. They arrived 12 hours before Nico's deadline, exhausted and wired on adrenaline. Ivy woke up fascinated by the cobblestone streets and Gothic architecture. Are we in a fairy tale, Mama? Something like that, baby. Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression went grim. Nico's here. He wants to meet with you before the deadline. Just you, no security, neutral location. Where? Charles Bridge, 1 hour. Mara, this could be a trap. It's not a trap. It's a reckoning. Sadie looked at Ivy, who was drawing pictures at the kitchen table, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. Stay with her. Don't let her out of your sight. Where are you going? Ivy asked. To meet someone important. I'll be back soon. Sadie kissed her daughter's forehead. Remember what I said about being brave? I remember, Mama. Sadie walked out into the Prague rain alone, heading for the Charles Bridge where, 7 years ago, a different version of herself had said vows to a dangerous man. The bridge was crowded with tourists despite the weather, vendors selling trinkets, artists painting portraits. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that somewhere among them, 2 people were about to collide with enough force to reshape everything. She saw him before he saw her. Nico Rinaldi stood at the center of the bridge, rain soaking through his expensive suit, staring out at the Vltava River like it held answers. 7 years had changed him. His dark hair had threads of silver at the temples. His face was harder, more lined, but his eyes were the same storm gray that looked back at her from Ivy's face every day. Sadie walked toward him, each step feeling like crossing an ocean. When she was 10 feet away, Nico turned. Their eyes met. The world stopped. Hello, Nico, she said. He stared at her like she was a ghost. Mara. Sadie, now. I don't care what name you're using. I care that you're alive. I care that you've been alive this whole time while I thought... His voice broke. I thought you were dead. Gabe said you disappeared, that he'd helped you start over, but I didn't know where or how or if you'd survived. And now I find out you were in Montana, raising my daughter, Mara, and you never told me. The fury in his voice could have melted steel. Sadie forced herself to stand her ground. I did it to protect her. From what? From me? From your world? From men like Silas who would use her to destroy you? Sadie's own anger rose to meet his. You divorced me to keep me safe, remember? You cut me loose so your enemies wouldn't use me as leverage. Well, I took it a step further. I made sure our daughter didn't exist in your world at all. And it worked for 7 years, Nico. 7 years of her being safe and happy and normal. You took my child from me. I saved her life. They stood there in the rain, 7 years of silence erupting between them, like a wound that had never healed. Tourists flowed around them, giving them space, sensing the violence barely contained in their stillness. Finally, Nico spoke again, his voice raw. What's her name? Ivy. Ivy, he repeated, testing it. Does she know about me? She knows you exist. She knows you're dangerous. She doesn't know the details. I want to meet her. After we survive Silas, if we survive. Nico stepped closer, and Sadie saw the full weight of 7 years in his eyes. I'm going to kill him, for threatening her, for threatening you, for every second of fear you've lived with because of my choices. Silas Marconi is a dead man walking. Killing him won't end this. There will always be another Silas, another threat. Then I'll kill them too. I'll kill everyone who even thinks about touching my daughter. Nico's hand came up, hovering near Sadie's face like he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. I've spent 7 years trying to forget you, trying to convince myself I did the right thing letting you go. And now you're standing in front of me with rain in your hair, telling me I have a daughter, and I don't know whether to kiss you or strangle you. Don't do either. Just help me keep Ivy safe. That's all that matters now. It's not all that matters. Nico finally touched her, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. But you're right. First we end Silas, then we figure out the rest. Somewhere in Prague, Silas Marconi was watching and waiting, believing he held all the cards. But he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd reunited two people who'd been forged in fire and blood, who'd loved and lost and survived. He'd given them a reason to fight together instead of apart. The storm was coming, and it would drown them all. They walked back from Charles Bridge in silence, the rain turning Prague's ancient streets slick and treacherous. Nico kept pace beside Sadie, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, but careful not to make contact. The anger was still there, coiled tight in his posture, but something else had joined it, a desperate hunger to see the child he'd never known existed. "She has your eyes," Sadie said finally, breaking the silence. "Everyone who looks at her notices them first. Storm gray. Exactly like yours." "What else?" Nico's voice was rough. "What else did she get from me? Your stubbornness, your intensity, the way you focus on something until you've mastered it completely." Sadie smiled despite everything. "She's brilliant, Nico. She reads at a 4th grade level already. She builds elaborate worlds with whatever materials she has, rocks, sticks, anything. She makes friends easily, but chooses carefully who she trusts. She's extraordinary. Because she has you raising her." The words came out softer than Sadie expected. "You gave her stability, safety, things I never could have provided." "You could have tried." "Could I?" Nico stopped walking, forcing Sadie to face him. "Be honest. If I'd known you were pregnant, what would have happened? I would have locked you in a fortress, surrounded you with guards, made your life a beautiful prison, and my enemies still would have found a way to get to you, because that's what they do. They find the cracks, they exploit the weaknesses. You and Ivy would have been targets every single day." Sadie wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because deep down she knew he was right. Nico's world didn't allow for softness, for vulnerability, for children who needed bedtime stories and skinned knees kissed better. His world dealt in blood and power and the brutal mathematics of survival. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Silas knows about her. That information is out there. Even if we kill him, someone else will use it eventually." "Then I burn it all down." Nico's expression hardened into something terrifying. "I've been building an empire for 15 years, Mara. I can tear it down in 15 minutes. I liquidate everything, erase every connection, and we disappear. All of us. You, me, Ivy. We become nobody, somewhere far away from Chicago and Montana and every place that knows our names. You'd give it all up? The power, the money, everything you've built? For my daughter?" Without hesitation, Nico started walking again, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I never wanted this life. I inherited it when my father died and his enemies came calling. I kept building it because stopping meant dying. But if there's a way out, a way to keep Ivy safe, I'll take it, even if it means losing everything else." They reached the safe house where Ivy waited. Marcus stood guard outside, his hand near his weapon until he recognized them. Inside, the apartment was warm and secure, and at the kitchen table, Ivy was showing one of Marcus's men how to draw horses. "You have to make the legs strong," she was explaining with grave seriousness. "Horses are powerful, They need strong legs to run. Nico stopped in the doorway, frozen. Sadie watched him see his daughter for the first time, watched the emotions cascade across his face. Wonder, fear, love, grief for all the moments he'd missed. Ivy looked up, felt the weight of his stare, and tilted her head curiously. "Mama, is this him?" she asked. "Is this my daddy?" Sadie's throat closed. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd explain. But now that it was here, words failed completely. She simply nodded. Ivy studied Nico with those storm-gray eyes that mirrored his own. "You're taller than I thought you'd be." A sound escaped Nico that might have been a laugh or a sob. He crossed the room slowly, carefully, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. When he reached the table, he knelt down so he was at Ivy's eye level. "Hi," he said, his voice barely steady. "I'm Nico. I'm your father, and I'm very, very sorry I wasn't there before. Mama says you didn't know about me, that she kept me secret to keep me safe." Ivy reached out and touched Nico's face, her small hand against his scarred cheek. "Are you sad you missed my birthdays?" "More than you can possibly understand." "That's okay. We can have 8 birthdays next year to make up for it. 8 cakes and 8 sets of presents." Ivy's logic was perfect and pure. "Do you like horses? I love horses. Cole lets me ride them on his ranch." Nico's jaw tightened at the mention of Cole, but he kept his voice gentle. "I like horses. Maybe someday you can teach me to ride properly." "I'm a very good teacher. Emma says I'm bossy, but in a good way." Ivy pulled her hand back and returned to her drawing. "Are you going to fight the bad man who wants to hurt me?" The question cut through the room like a blade. Nico glanced at Sadie, who'd been standing frozen by the door before answering. "Yes, but I'm going to make sure you stay safe first. That's the most important thing. Mama always keeps me safe. She's very brave." Ivy colored in her horse's mane with careful strokes. "Will you keep Mama safe too?" "Always, I promise." "Good. She worries a lot. Sometimes I hear her checking the locks at night when she thinks I'm asleep. Sometimes she has bad dreams." Ivy looked up at Nico again. "Are you the bad dream she's running from?" The innocence of the question made it even more devastating. Nico's hands curled into fists, his knuckles white. "Maybe, but I'm going to try to be a good dream from now on." Ivy seemed to consider this, then nodded acceptance. "Okay, you can stay for dinner. We're having pasta. Mama makes really good pasta." Just like that, she returned to her drawing. The conversation concluded in her mind. Nico stood slowly, his eyes never leaving his daughter, drinking in every detail. When he finally turned to Sadie, his expression was raw. "She's perfect," he whispered. "I know. I missed everything. First steps, first words, first day of school. I took pictures, videos. I documented everything even though I knew you'd never see them. I couldn't help it." Sadie pulled out her phone, the one she kept for Ivy's photos only, never connected to anything that could be traced. "I can show you if you want. 7 years and a few hundred images." Nico took the phone like it was sacred. His hands shook as he scrolled through the photos. Ivy as a newborn, red and screaming. Ivy at 6 months, laughing at something off camera. Ivy's first birthday with cake smashed all over her face. Ivy on her first day of kindergarten, backpack too big for her small frame. Ivy on a horse, grinning with pure joy. "You saved everything," Nico said. "I saved everything, because some part of me always knew this day would come, that somehow, someday you'd find us, and I wanted you to know that I never tried to erase you from her life. I just tried to keep her alive long enough to have a life." Nico handed back the phone, his face wet with rain or tears, or both. "Thank you for keeping her safe, for giving her a childhood, for being strong enough to do what I couldn't." Before Sadie could respond, Gabe's voice crackled through Marcus's radio. We have movement. Silas's people are mobilizing. I think he's moved up the timeline. Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides. How long do we have? Hard to say. Could be hours, could be minutes. He knows Nico's in Prague, knows he's not alone despite the demands. Silas is adapting. Where's the meet supposed to happen? Nico asked, all business now. Abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. Silas picked it because it's isolated, easy to control, multiple exits for him if things go wrong. Gabe's voice was tight. It's a killing floor, Nico. He's not planning to negotiate. He's planning to execute you on camera and send the footage to every family that's ever opposed him. Then we change the location, force him to adapt to us. He won't go for it. He'll just kill. Gabe stopped, clearly remembering Ivy was in the room. He'll escalate. Nico looked at his daughter, still drawing peacefully at the table, and Sadie saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. The cold arithmetic of violence, weighing lives and probabilities and acceptable losses. No, she said sharply. Don't even think it. Think what? Whatever you're planning that involves using Ivy as bait. I can see it on your face, Nico. The wheels turning, figuring out how to leverage her to draw Silas out. The answer is no. I would never. Wouldn't you? To end this threat permanently? To protect her from future attacks? Sadie stepped between Nico and Ivy. I know how you think. I was married to you. You're calculating whether the short-term risk is worth the long-term safety. But she's 7 years old, Nico. She's not a chess piece. The room went silent. Even Ivy had stopped drawing, sensing the tension. Nico's expression cycled through anger, denial, and finally something that looked like shame. You're right, he said quietly. I was thinking exactly that. Old habits. He ran a hand through his wet hair. But you're right, she's not part of this game, so we need another option. We have one, Sadie said. Me. I go to the meet in Ivy's place. Absolutely not. Why not? Silas wants leverage over you. I'm your ex-wife, the mother of your child. That's leverage. And unlike Ivy, I can defend myself if necessary. Mara, he'll kill you. Maybe, but he'll keep me alive longer than he'd keep a 7-year-old. Long enough for you and Gabe to figure out a rescue. Sadie crossed her arms. Unless you have a better idea? Nico looked at Marcus at the phone connecting them to Gabe, at anywhere but Sadie or Ivy. Finally, he spoke into the radio. Gabe, how many men do we have in Prague? 12. Good people, loyal, well-armed. And how many does Silas have? We estimate 20 to 30, but Nico, numbers don't matter if we can't get to you before he executes the plan. Then we need to get him to bring the fight to us, somewhere we control, somewhere we've prepared. Nico's mind was working again, strategy clicking into place. The old town square. Tourist-heavy, lots of witnesses, security cameras everywhere. Silas wants a spectacle? We'll give him one, but on our terms. He'll never agree to a public meeting. He will if I make him angry enough. If I threaten the one thing he cares about more than revenge. Nico smiled, and it was a terrible thing. His reputation. Silas has spent years building himself up as the smart one, the patient one, the man who plans instead of reacts. If I publicly call him a coward, if I live stream myself challenging him in the middle of Prague with his deadline ticking down, he'll come. His ego won't let him refuse. Sadie saw the brilliance of it and the madness of it in equal measure. You're going to start a war in the middle of a crowded square. I'm going to end a war in the middle of a crowded square. There's a difference. Nico pulled out his own phone. Gabe, set it up. I want cameras. I want our people positioned around the square. And I want local police alerted that something's going down. Anonymous tip, whatever it takes. The more official presence, the less likely Silas can just execute me and walk away. This is insane. This is the only play we have that doesn't risk Ivy. Nico glanced at his daughter, who'd returned to her drawing. I'll give up anything, my life, my empire, my future, but I won't bet with hers. The plan came together quickly. Gabe coordinated from Chicago while Marcus and his team set up positions around Old Town Square. Nico would go alone to the center of the square at midnight, 3 hours before Silas's original deadline, and issue his challenge. Sadie would stay at the safe house with Ivy, protected by half of Marcus's team. If things went wrong, they had extraction vehicles ready to get Sadie and Ivy to the airport and out of the country before Silas could regroup. As midnight approached, Sadie helped Ivy get ready for bed in the safe house's small bedroom. Her daughter was exhausted from the day's travel and emotional upheaval, but she fought sleep the way children do when they sense something important is happening. Is Daddy going to die? Ivy asked as Sadie tucked the blanket around her. The question stole Sadie's breath. Why would you ask that? Because everyone keeps looking sad when they think I'm not watching. And Daddy hugged me for a really long time before he left, like he might not get to hug me again. Ivy's gray eyes were too knowing. I'm not a baby, Mama. I know something bad is happening. Sadie sat on the edge of the bed and took her daughter's hand. Your daddy is going to do something very dangerous to keep us safe. I hope he doesn't die. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he doesn't die. But yes, baby, there's a chance he might not come back. Like how my goldfish didn't come back? Sort of, except Daddy's much harder to kill than a goldfish. Ivy giggled despite everything, then sobered. If he dies, will we go back to Montana? Back to Cole and Emma and the clinic? Would you want to? I like it there. It's safe and quiet and nobody tries to hurt us. Ivy squeezed Sadie's hand. But I like having a daddy too, even if he's only been my daddy for one day. He looked at me like I was the most important thing in the whole world. You are the most important thing in his whole world. That's why he's fighting so hard. Then I hope he wins. I want to have more than one day with him. I want 8 birthdays and writing lessons and all the things other kids get with their daddies. Sadie kissed Ivy's forehead, her heart breaking. Me too, baby. Me too. Ivy finally fell asleep, her small hand still clutching Sadie's. Carefully, Sadie extracted herself and returned to the main room where Marcus was monitoring multiple screens showing different angles of Old Town Square. Nico was already there, standing alone in the center of the empty plaza, his phone held up to stream video. People of Prague, and everyone watching around the world, Nico's voice came through the speakers, clear and commanding. My name is Nico Rinaldi. Some of you know that name. Some of you fear it. Tonight, I'm here to issue a challenge to a coward named Silas Marcone. Marcus whistled low. He's really doing it. He's putting everything out in the open. On screen, Nico continued. Silas, you threaten my daughter. You think that makes you powerful. You think that makes you smart. But all it makes you is a coward who hides behind children because you can't face me directly. So here I am. No guards, no weapons, no protection. Just me, standing in the middle of Prague, waiting for you. You want to kill me? Come do it. Prove you're the man you claim to be, or run back to whatever hole you crawled out of and admit you were never anything but talk. The live stream was already going viral. Comments flooded in from around the world, thousands of people watching this madness unfold in real time. Sadie saw the genius of it. Silas couldn't ignore this public challenge. His reputation in the criminal underworld depended on being seen as strong, as fearless. If he didn't respond, he'd look weak. Every family he'd intimidated, every alliance he'd built, would crumble. Movement, one of Marcus's men called out. 3 vehicles approaching from the north. On the screens, black SUVs pulled into the square. Men poured out, at least 20 of them, surrounding Nico in a loose circle. And then Silas himself emerged, impeccably dressed despite the late hour, walking toward Nico with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. You stupid, arrogant fool, Silas called out, his voice picked up by Nico's phone camera. Did you really think I'd fall for something so obvious? I think you couldn't resist, Nico replied, because deep down, you know you're nothing without your reputation. And I just destroyed it in front of the world unless you back up your threats. Silas's smile was razor sharp. Oh, I'll back them up. But first, we're going to have a conversation about respect. About what happens when people like you think they can challenge people like me. He gestured and his men moved forward. Nico didn't run, didn't fight. He'd promised to come unarmed and alone, and he'd kept that promise. The men grabbed him, forced him to his knees. Nico's phone fell to the ground but kept streaming, the camera angled up to catch everything. "Where's the girl?" Silas demanded. "Where's your daughter?" "Safe. Somewhere you'll never find her." "We'll see about that." Silas pulled out his own phone and made a call. "Bring her." Sadie's blood turned to ice. Marcus was already moving, checking his weapons. "They don't have her. They can't have her. She's been here the whole time." The safe house door exploded inward. The blast threw Sadie backward, her ears ringing. Through the smoke and debris, she saw shapes moving, armed men pouring through the destroyed entrance. Marcus's team opened fire, the confined space erupting into chaos. Sadie scrambled toward Ivy's room, her only thought to reach her daughter. She made it 3 steps before someone grabbed her from behind. A cloth pressed over her face, chemical sweet and overwhelming. Sadie fought, but her limbs were already going numb. Her vision blurred. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Ivy screaming her name. She woke to cold concrete and the smell of rust and water. Her head pounded. Her vision swam. Slowly, the world came into focus. She was in a basement, dank and windowless. Chains secured her to a support pillar, and across from her, similarly chained, was Gabe. "Welcome back," he said, his face bruised and bloody. "Sorry about this. They had a second team we didn't know about. Hit the safe house while everyone was watching the square." "Ivy? Where's Ivy?" "They have her. Brought her here about 20 minutes ago. She's upstairs, unharmed for now." Gabe's voice was steady despite his injuries. "Silas wanted us all together, one big happy family reunion before he kills us all on camera." Sadie tested her chains, but they were solid, professional. She looked around the basement, searching for anything she could use, any weakness in their prison. "Where's Nico?" "Also upstairs. Silas brought him here after the square. Beat him pretty badly from what I heard, but he's alive." Gabe managed a grim smile. "Silas wants to make this last. Wants to savor it. That gives us time to figure a way out." "How?" "We're chained in a basement, outnumbered, probably outgunned. They have Ivy. There's no way out, Gabe." "There's always a way out. We just have to find it before Silas gets bored and starts cutting pieces off people I care about." Footsteps on the stairs made them both tense. 2 of Silas's men came down, dragging Nico between them. They chained him to another pillar, then left without a word. Nico's face was a mess of bruises and blood, but his eyes were sharp when they found Sadie. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than you. Did they hurt Ivy?" "No. She's scared but unharmed. Silas is keeping her in a room upstairs. I could hear her crying for you." The sound Sadie made was barely human. She pulled against her chains hard enough that the metal cut into her wrists. "I'm going to kill him. I'm going to rip his throat out with my teeth if I have to." "Get in line," Nico said. Then to Gabe, "Options?" "Limited. The chains are solid, the guards are professional, and Silas has at least 15 men in this building. Even if we break free, we'd have to fight through them all to get to Ivy." "Then we make them bring her to us." "How exactly do we do that?" Nico's smile was bloody and terrible. "We give Silas what he wants. We give him his show. We let him think he's won, and we wait for him to get careless." More footsteps, and this time Silas himself descended the stairs, followed by 2 men carrying camera equipment. He looked at his 3 prisoners with satisfaction. a cat admiring trapped mice. I have to say, Nico, you really made this more difficult than it needed to be. All this drama in the square, the live stream, the public challenge. But in the end, here you are, chained in my basement like the animal you are. Where's my daughter? Safe. For now. Whether she stays safe depends entirely on how cooperative you're willing to be. Silas gestured to his men, who began setting up cameras. See? I'm going to give you a choice. Actually, I'm going to give you several choices, and the world is going to watch you make them. Every family that's ever opposed me, every upstart who thinks they can challenge my authority, they'll all see what happens when you threaten Silas Marconi. You're insane, Sadie said. I'm practical. Fear is currency in our world, and I'm about to make a very large deposit. Silas checked his watch. We'll start in an hour. That gives you time to say your goodbyes, make your peace, whatever it is people do before they die. I'd suggest you use it wisely. He left them alone with the cameras, red lights blinking in the darkness. Nico immediately started working on his chains, testing each link for weakness. Gabe did the same. Sadie closed her eyes and focused on breathing, on staying calm, on not screaming for her daughter. We're not dying here, Nico said quietly. I don't care what it takes. We're getting Ivy out, and we're ending this. With what? Sadie opened her eyes. We have no weapons, no backup, no plan. Silas has already won. He thinks he's won. There's a difference. Nico found a loose link in his chain and began working it methodically. Gabe, when was the last time you checked in with your people? 2 hours ago, before the safe house got hit. So they know something's wrong. They'll be looking for us. Looking and finding are different things. This city has 1,000 basements just like this one. Nico's chain gave slightly, the link starting to bend. Then we make noise. We make enough noise that they can't help but find us. An hour later, Silas returned with his cameras and his cruelty. He'd changed clothes, dressed like he was attending a business meeting rather than planning multiple murders. He positioned the cameras carefully, making sure they'd capture every angle, every moment of suffering. Bring the child, he ordered. They brought Ivy down the stairs. She was crying, her face streaked with tears. But when she saw Sadie, she tried to run. The guard holding her yanked her back roughly, making her whimper. Let her go, Sadie said, her voice deadly calm. Whatever you're planning, she doesn't need to see it. Oh, but she does. That's the whole point. Silas crouched in front of Ivy, his voice sickeningly gentle. Hello, little one. Do you know who I am? Ivy didn't answer, just stared at him with those storm-gray eyes full of fear and fury. I'm the man your father has been fighting for a very long time, and tonight he has to make some choices, hard choices, choices about who lives and who dies. Silas stood and gestured to his prisoners. Here's how this works. Nico, you get to choose. Your daughter lives or your ex-wife lives. One of them dies tonight, right here, right now. You pick which one. The basement went silent except for Ivy's ragged breathing. No, Nico said. No isn't an option. You choose or I kill them both and make you watch before I kill you too. Then kill me first. Let them go and kill me. Take your revenge, make your statement, but let them go. Silas laughed. That's not how this works. See, killing you is the easy part. Making you suffer, making you live with impossible choices. That's the art. So choose Nico, your daughter, who you just met today, or Mara, the woman you divorced to keep safe. Who lives? Sadie watched Nico's face, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes again, saw him measuring lives and probabilities, weighing his daughter against his ex-wife, and she saw the exact moment when he found the answer. Ivy, Nico said clearly. Ivy lives. Kill Mara if you have to kill someone, but my daughter lives. The words hit Sadie like bullets, even though she understood the strategy. Protect the innocent, save the child, sacrifice the adult. It was the only choice any parent would make, but understanding it and hearing it were different things. Silas's smile widened. Excellent. See how easy that was? Now we just need Mara's agreement. After all, it's her life we're discussing. What do you say, Mara? Ready to die so Nico's daughter can live? Sadie met Nico's eyes across the basement and saw the plea there. Trust me. Follow my lead. She took a breath and played her part. Do it, she said. But let Gabe take her away from here first. She doesn't need to see this. Oh, but she does. She needs to understand what her father is, what her whole family is. She needs to see the blood and the pain and the cost of this life. She's 7 years old, Sadie's voice cracked. You've already destroyed her childhood. Don't destroy her future, too. Silas considered this. Finally, he shrugged. Fine, it doesn't matter. She'll remember this night for the rest of her life, whether she watches or not. He gestured to one of his men. Unchained Gabe. He can take the girl upstairs, but Gabe, if you try anything at all, I kill them both in front of the child. Understood? Understood, Gabe said. They unlocked his chains. Gabe stood slowly, making no sudden movements, and crossed to where Ivy stood. He picked her up gently, holding her close. Close your eyes, sweetheart, he whispered. Close your eyes and think about Montana. Think about the horses and the mountains and the clinic. Think about anything but here. As Gabe carried Ivy toward the stairs, she looked back at Sadie. Their eyes met one last time. I love you, Mama, Ivy said. I love you too, baby. Be brave, just a little while longer. They disappeared upstairs, and the basement fell silent except for the hum of the cameras capturing everything. Silas walked to Sadie, pulled out a gun, and pressed it against her forehead. Any last words? Just one, Sadie said. Duck. The confusion on Silas's face lasted exactly 1 second before the basement's far wall exploded inward. The explosion tore through the basement like the hand of an angry god, brick and mortar erupting inward in a cloud of dust and fire. Silas stumbled backward, the gun dropping from his hand as debris rained down around them. Through the gaping hole in the wall came Marcus and his team, weapons raised, moving with the precision of men who'd done this 1,000 times. Chaos erupted. Silas's men scrambled for weapons, but Marcus's team was faster, better trained. Gunfire echoed in the confined space, deafening and deadly. Sadie pressed herself against the pillar she was chained to, making herself as small a target as possible while Nico worked frantically at his weakened chain link. Get down, Marcus shouted, diving toward Sadie. He fired 3 shots at the guard approaching her, then pulled out bolt cutters and went to work on her chains. Gabe gave us the location, GPS tracker in his shoe. We've been circling the building for the last 20 minutes, waiting for the right moment. The chains fell away. Sadie's wrists were bloody and raw, but she ignored the pain. Ivy, where's Ivy? Gabe has her. He's already outside, heading for the extraction vehicle. Marcus moved to Nico next, cutting through his chains. We need to move. This building isn't structurally sound, and we've got more of Silas's people incoming. Nico was free in seconds. He grabbed the gun from the fallen guard and moved like death itself, his eyes scanning the smoke-filled basement for Silas. But the crime boss had vanished in the chaos, escaped through some hidden exit. Let him go, Marcus urged. We need to get you out before... An explosion rocked the floor above them. Dust and chunks of ceiling rained down. The building was coming apart, whether from Marcus's initial breach or from Silas's people trying to bury them all. It didn't matter. The basement was rapidly becoming a tomb. This way. One of Marcus's men had found a service tunnel, some old maintenance access that led away from the building. They ran, Sadie between Nico and Marcus, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls as the building groaned and shuddered behind them. They emerged 3 blocks away, climbing up through a manhole into a prog alley wet with fresh rain. The building they'd escaped was burning now, flames licking up into the night sky. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police, fire trucks, emergency services responding to what had to look like a terrorist attack. A black SUV screeched to a halt beside them. The door flew open and Gabe leaned out. "Get in! Now!" They piled in, Sadie scrambling into the back seat where Ivy was buckled in, trembling and wide-eyed. Sadie pulled her daughter into her arms, holding on so tight she could feel Ivy's heartbeat against her own. "Mama," Ivy sobbed. "Mama, I was so scared." "I know, baby, I know. But it's over now. We're safe." Gabe drove like a man possessed, weaving through Prague's narrow streets while Marcus coordinated with his remaining team members via radio. Behind them, more explosions lit up the night sky. Silas was burning evidence, destroying anything that could connect him to the evening's violence. "Where are we going?" Nico asked from the front seat, blood still dripping from a cut above his eye. "Airport. Private plane is fueled and ready. Will be wheels up in 30 minutes, out of European airspace in an hour." Gabe took a corner hard enough to make the tires scream. "Silas is going to come after us, but we'll have a head start." He saw Ivy. He knows what she looks like. He won't stop until he's dead, Nico finished. His voice was cold, final, which he will be. Soon. Sadie looked up from Ivy's hair, her daughter still crying against her shoulder. No more revenge, no more violence. We take Ivy and we disappear, completely this time. All of us. That's not enough. As long as Silas lives, as long as you stay in this life, there will always be another Silas. Sadie's voice cracked. You said you'd give it all up for Ivy. Your empire, your power, everything. Did you mean it, or were those just words? The SUV fell silent except for the engine and Ivy's hiccuping sobs. Nico turned in his seat to look at his daughter, really look at her. She was pressed against Sadie, small and terrified and perfect, and in her face he could see all the futures she'd never have if he stayed in this world. The birthday parties interrupted by violence, the school friends who'd pull away when they learned who her father was, the constant fear, the endless running, the life Sadie had been living for 7 years. I meant it, he said quietly, every word. They made it to the airport with minutes to spare. The private plane was small but fast, and the pilot asked no questions when they boarded, looking like they'd survived a war. Maybe because they had. As the plane climbed into the night sky, leaving Prague and its burning buildings behind, Sadie finally let herself breathe. Ivy had fallen asleep in her lap, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. Nico sat across from them, watching his daughter sleep with an expression Sadie had never seen on his face before. Something soft and broken and healing all at once. Where do we go? Sadie asked. Where in the world is far enough away from Silas Marconi? Nowhere, Gabe said from his seat near the cockpit. He'd been on his phone for the last 20 minutes, coordinating something. Which is why we're not running. We're ending this. How exactly do we end a man with unlimited resources in a vendetta? We take away his resources. We turn his own people against him. We make him vulnerable, and then we strike. Gabe pulled up something on his tablet and showed it to Nico. While you were busy getting captured, I was busy working. I've been documenting every one of Silas's criminal activities for the last 6 months. Every deal, every murder, every bribe. I have evidence that could put him away for 3 lifetimes. The FBI won't touch him. He owns too many people. The FBI won't, but Interpol will. European authorities who don't answer to Chicago politics. Gabe's smile was sharp. I've already made contact. They're very interested in Mr. Marcone, especially after tonight's little show in Prague. Combine my evidence with the footage from Silas's own cameras, the ones that were live streaming when we breached the basement, and we have enough to destroy him. Nico studied the tablet, scrolling through page after page of damning information. This would work, but it would also expose parts of my own operation. I'd be vulnerable. Only if you plan to stay in the life, but if you're really walking away, Gabe let the implication hang. Sadie watched understanding dawn on Nico's face. You want me to burn it all down? My empire, my connections, everything I've built. Sacrifice it all to take down Silas. I want you to trade that empire for something worth more. A chance to be a father. A chance to live without constantly watching your back. A chance to give Ivy the childhood she deserves. Nico looked at his sleeping daughter, then at Sadie. What do you want? It was the first time he'd asked her opinion about anything that mattered. The first time he'd given her a choice instead of making decisions for her. Sadie felt something shift between them, a rebalancing of power that had been tipped toward him for so long. I want Ivy to grow up without fear, she said. I want her to make friends and go to school and worry about normal things like homework and birthday parties. I want her to know her father, but not the crime boss. The man. The person you could be if you weren't constantly fighting to hold an empire together. That man might not exist. I've been doing this so long, I don't know who I am without it. Then maybe it's time to find out. Nico was quiet for a long time. Then he handed the tablet back to Gabe. Do it. Give Interpol everything. Burn it all down. I want out. The plane touched down in Montreal 18 hours later. They'd spent the flight making plans, calling in favors, setting in motion the machinery that would dismantle Nico Rinaldi's criminal empire and Silas Marconi's life simultaneously. By the time they reached Canadian soil, arrest warrants were being issued across 3 continents. Silas was picked up in Vienna 72 hours later, caught at a safe house he thought was secure. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and without Nico to fight, his reason for the vendetta evaporated into meaningless rage. He'd spend the rest of his life in a European prison, his reputation destroyed, his empire carved up by rivals who'd been waiting for him to fall. Nico's organization fractured without his leadership, the pieces absorbed by other families or dissolved by law enforcement. His accounts were frozen, his properties seized, his legacy reduced to case files and cautionary tales. Everything he'd built over 15 years disappeared like smoke. And in a small town in New Zealand, as far from Chicago and Montana and Prague. As you could get, Sadie and Nico and Ivy started over. They bought a house on the coast, nothing fancy, just a weathered cottage with a view of the ocean and enough land for Ivy to run. Gabe had helped them establish new identities, not Sadie Mitchell this time, but the Carter family, Michael, Anna, and Ivy Carter, ordinary people with ordinary lives. Nico struggled at first with the quiet. He'd wake up at 3 in the morning, instinctively reaching for weapons that weren't there anymore, checking for threats that would never come. He'd pace the house like a caged animal, unable to settle, unable to believe the danger was really over. But slowly, over weeks and then months, he learned to breathe. Learned to exist in a world where violence wasn't currency and power meant nothing. He learned to be a father, stumbling through it with the same intensity he'd brought to everything else in his life. He coached Ivy's soccer team despite knowing nothing about soccer. He learned to braid her hair after watching 36 YouTube tutorials. He read her bedtime stories with voices for every character, making her giggle until she couldn't breathe. Sadie watched him transform and felt herself transforming too. The fear that had lived in her bones for 7 years gradually loosened its grip. She stopped checking locks obsessively, stopped planning escape routes from every room. She opened a small veterinary practice in town, nothing like the clinic in Montana, but satisfying in its own way. She made friends, real friends, who knew her as Anna Carter and nothing else. And she and Nico circled each other carefully. 2 people learning to be something other than what they'd been. They weren't the young couple who'd married in haste, and they weren't the divorced strangers who'd met on Charles Bridge. They were something new, still being defined. 6 months after they'd arrived in New Zealand, Nico found Sadie on the beach behind their house. She was watching the sunset, her bare feet in the surf, her auburn hair blowing in the wind. He stood beside her in comfortable silence for a long moment before speaking. "I never apologized," he said, "for divorcing you, for making that decision without really asking what you wanted. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was just protecting myself from the guilt of dragging you deeper into my world. I never apologized either for keeping Ivy from you. I told myself it was about her safety, and it was. But it was also about punishing you for pushing me away." Sadie turned to face him. "We both made choices we thought were right. Neither of us was completely wrong or completely right. Do you think we can move past it, build something new? I think we already are. Every day we don't run. Every night we sleep without fear. Every moment with Ivy. That's us building something new." Nico reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his scarred hands. "I'm not the same man you married. I don't have money or power or any of the things I used to think mattered. I'm just me, broken and trying to be better. Is that enough?" "It's everything," Sadie said, and kissed him. It wasn't the desperate, passionate kiss of their early days. It was softer, steadier, built on understanding rather than illusion. It tasted like second chances and hard-won peace. It tasted like home. They were married quietly 6 months later, just the three of them and Gabe, who'd flown in from wherever he'd disappeared to after helping them settle. Ivy wore a purple dress she'd picked out herself and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. She stood between her parents while a local justice of the peace conducted the ceremony on their beach, and when they exchanged rings, she clapped and declared it the best day ever. The rings were simple silver bands, nothing like the diamond Sadie had sold years ago. But inside Nico's ring, Sadie had engraved 3 words: "Until we meet again." Because they had met again, against all odds, and found their way back to each other through blood and fear and love that refused to die even when it should have. Years passed. Ivy grew from a little girl into a teenager, then a young woman. She inherited her father's intensity and her mother's compassion, along with those storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through to truth. She knew the broad strokes of her parents' history, that they'd come from dangerous circumstances, that they'd sacrificed everything for her safety, but not the details. Those would wait until she was older, until she could understand the full weight of what had been given up for her. She grew up strong and fierce and kind, excelling at everything she tried. She became a veterinarian like her mother, working at the practice they'd expanded together. She dated a local boy who made her laugh and treated her like she hung the moon. She lived a normal life, beautiful in its ordinariness, and never knew how rare and precious that normalcy truly was. Nico and Sadie grew old together on their coastal cottage. Their hair turned gray, their hands grew weathered from work, their faces lined with years of laughter and love. They renovated the house gradually, adding a greenhouse where Sadie grew roses, adding a workshop where Nico built furniture with the same precision he'd once applied to much darker pursuits. On quiet evenings, they'd sit on their porch and watch the ocean, holding hands like teenagers. Sometimes they talked about the past, about Chicago and Montana, about the choices that had led them here. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, needing no words to communicate the depth of what they'd survived together. Gabe visited once a year, never staying long, never explaining exactly what he did or where he'd been. But he always brought gifts for Ivy, always spent hours talking with Nico and Sadie about everything and nothing. He'd aged too, the violence of their old life etched into the lines around his eyes. But he smiled more now, laughed easier. He'd found his own version of peace, whatever that looked like. On Ivy's 25th birthday, Sadie and Nico gave her a box they'd kept hidden for years. Inside was a leather journal and a sealed envelope. "What is this?" Ivy asked, turning the journal over in her hands. "Your father's story," Sadie said. "Everything we never told you about where we came from, who we were before we became the Carters. We wrote it down so you'd have the truth, not rumors or half-understood pieces." We wanted you to grow up without the weight of our past, Nico added. But you're a woman now, old enough to understand, old enough to decide what to do with this knowledge. Ivy looked at the journal, then at her parents. Do you regret it? Everything you gave up? Not for a second, Nico said. I gave up an empire of blood and got a daughter worth more than any kingdom. I gave up power and got peace. That's not a trade any sane man would regret. What about you, Mom? You gave up everything too. Your name, your life, 7 years of running and hiding. Was it worth it? Sadie looked at her daughter, this brilliant woman she'd raised against impossible odds, and felt her heart swell with pride and love. Every sleepless night, every moment of fear, every sacrifice. It was all worth it to see you standing here, safe and whole and happy. You were worth everything, Ivy. You still are. Ivy hugged them both, tears streaming down her face. I'm going to read this, all of it, and then I'm going to ask you questions, probably a million questions. But whatever I learn, whatever I find out about who you used to be, it won't change how I feel about you. You're my parents. You're the people who loved me enough to burn the world down and walk away from the ashes. That's all that matters. That night, Ivy sat in her childhood bedroom and opened the journal. She read about a young woman named Mara who fell in love with danger. She read about a crime boss named Nico who built an empire on fear. She read about impossible choices and desperate escapes, about a 7-year-old girl caught in the crossfire of her parents' past. And she read about love, the complicated, messy, imperfect kind that survived divorce and distance and death threats, the kind that grew stronger in the breaking and reforming, the kind that proved redemption was possible even for people who'd done terrible things. The sealed envelope contained something else, a letter from Nico to his younger self, written in the neat handwriting Ivy knew from birthday cards and grocery lists. If I could go back and tell myself one thing, the letter read, it would be this: power is not protection. Money is not security. The only thing that truly matters is love. And love requires sacrifice. Real sacrifice. Not the kind where you give up things you don't need anyway. The kind where you give up everything you think defines you and discover you're more without it than you ever were with it. I spent 15 years building an empire, and I destroyed it in 15 minutes for a daughter I'd known for 15 hours. Best decision I ever made. Don't wait as long as I did to figure out what really matters. Ivy folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. She looked out her window at the ocean, at the stars reflected in its surface, at the peaceful world her parents had built from violence and fear. And she understood finally the depth of what had been given for her. Not just safety or a normal childhood, but the chance to be whoever she wanted to be, free from the weight of legacy and blood debt. She went downstairs and found her parents on the porch, exactly where she'd left them. They looked up nervously as she approached, clearly worried about her reaction to the truth. Ivy sat between them, taking their hands. Thank you, she said simply, for everything, for the sacrifices I never knew you made, for the love that kept me safe even when I didn't know I needed protecting, for being brave enough to start over, even when it meant losing everything else. Sadie cried. Nico pulled them both close. They sat together as a family, watching the stars come out over the ocean, and let the past finally rest. 20 years later, when Sadie was 73 and Nico was 75, they renewed their vows on the same beach where they'd married the second time. Ivy stood beside them again, this time with her own children, twin boys with their grandfather's gray eyes and their grandmother's stubborn spirit. Gabe was there too, white-haired and moving slowly but still sharp as ever. The ceremony was simple. Just family and a few close friends, speaking words of love and commitment as the sun set over the Pacific. When the justice asked if they'd like to exchange new rings, Nico pulled out a small box. Inside was the ring Sadie had sold 7 years after their first marriage, the diamond ring she had pawned for cash to fuel her escape. Nico had spent years tracking it down, moving through pawn shops and jewelry dealers across 3 continents until he'd finally found it in a small shop in Montana. He'd bought it back and carried it with him ever since, waiting for the right moment. "I know it represents a different time," he said, sliding it onto her finger beside the silver band she'd never taken off. "A time when we were different people making different choices. But it's also proof that some things circle back, that what we thought was lost forever can be found again, that endings can become beginnings." Sadie looked at the ring sparkling in the sunset, then at the man she'd loved and lost and found again. "Until we meet again," she whispered, reading the inscription inside his band. "We already did," Nico said, "and we're never letting go again." They kissed while their grandchildren giggled and applauded, while the ocean sang its eternal song, while the world turned indifferent to their small, perfect moment of joy. 5 years later, Sadie died peacefully in her sleep, Nico's hand in hers, a smile on her face. Her last words were about the roses in the greenhouse needing water, ordinary and beautiful. Nico held her until morning, memorizing the feel of her hand in his, the peace on her face, the weight of a love that had survived everything life could throw at it. He lasted 6 months without her before his heart simply stopped, worn out from years of violence and stress, and finally, peace. Ivy found him in the rose garden, surrounded by the flowers Sadie had loved, a photograph of their daughter clutched in his hand. They buried them together on the hillside overlooking their cottage and the ocean beyond. The headstone was simple: Michael and Anna Carter, beloved parents and grandparents. Until we meet again. Only Ivy and Gabe knew the truth of who was really buried there, knew that beneath the ordinary names rested Nico Rinaldi and Mara Lane, 2 people who'd clawed their way out of darkness and into light, 2 people who'd loved so fiercely they'd been willing to die for it, and more importantly, willing to live for it. Gabe died 2 years later, his secrets buried with him. But before he went, he gave Ivy one final gift: a safety deposit box key and an address in Switzerland. Inside the box was enough money to ensure Ivy and her children would never want for anything, all of it legally obtained from investments Gabe had made on Nico's behalf before the empire fell. "Your father wanted you to have choices," Gabe's letter explained. "He wanted you to be able to help people the way he never could. Use this money however you see fit. Build something good from the ashes of something terrible. Prove that redemption is real and permanent and worth the cost." Ivy used the money to establish a foundation that helped domestic violence victims disappear and start over, just like her mother had done. She funded safe houses and new identities and fresh starts for hundreds of people over the years. She turned her father's blood money into lifelines for the desperate and hunted. And she told her children the full truth about their grandparents, not sanitized or simplified, but honest and complete. She told them about crime and violence, about impossible choices and desperate escapes, but she also told them about love, the redemptive, transformative kind that turned killers into carpenters and fugitives into healers. "Your grandfather once told me that power is not protection," Ivy would say. "He learned that lesson late, but he learned it completely. And because he did, I got to grow up free. I got to be whoever I wanted to be." That's his real legacy. Not the empire he built, but the empire he destroyed so I could build something better. The cottage on the coast remained in the family for generations. Ivy's children brought their own children there, and those children brought theirs. The rose garden grew wild and beautiful, tended by hands that never knew the violence that had planted it. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm, washing away footprints and secrets and sins, leaving only sand and memory and the ghost of a love story that refused to end even after death. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was right and the stars were bright, you could almost hear it. The sound of 2 people who'd fought their way through hell to find each other, who'd sacrificed everything for a daughter who deserved better, who'd proven that even the most broken people can be redeemed by love strong enough to rewrite destiny. The hunt was over. The fear was gone. The story was complete. And in its completion, it became something more than just a tale of crime and escape, more than just a chronicle of survival. It became proof that endings are just beginnings waiting to be discovered, that love is the most powerful force in any universe, and that sometimes, against all odds and logic, the dangerous man and the desperate woman and the daughter who saved them both can find their way to happily ever after. Not the fairy tale version, where everything is perfect and nothing hurts, but the real version, where scars become stories and pain becomes purpose, and the family you fight for becomes the family you build, one ordinary day at a time, until those days add up to a lifetime of peace, hard-won and fiercely protected. That was their legacy. Not power or fear or the empire Nico had ruled, but the simple, profound truth that it's never too late to choose differently, never too late to walk away from dark to be all along. And in the end, that was worth more than any kingdom.